Paul, thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Awesome. Incredible. It means a lot. So let's, as I said, the goal is really just to chat with people about what they do, what they've done. You recently retired, but like you said, you still fly. You're a pilot.
Right.
And you still fly. So you're
it's in the blood.
Yeah. You're very much an active pilot. So let's, there's no like script we'll just talk about whatever we end up talking about.
Okay.
Which is awesome. But let's go to the beginning. Like talk to me a few minutes about your like growing up. When'd you get the bug and when did that come about?
Well, let's see. I was born in 1956.
Okay.
So,
you don't look it.
Well, thanks. I grew up a long time ago. And my mom worked as a cashier in a drugstore, and they had a lot of stuff in the drugstore and the hotel, a gift shop and things like that. And they had model airplane kits there. And my mom would buy me the model airplane kits and bring them home. And so as a kid, I grew up building those plastic model airplanes and loving all the different kinds, the World War II ones and even the Century Series jets. I built all those. And I was in San Antonio. They had some air bases there, and I'd see the airplanes flying overhead.
Is that where you're from, San Antonio?
Yeah. I left there when I was 14.
Got it.
But my first years were there. And so I just enjoyed looking at the airplanes flying through the sky. I liked watching the airplane movies on the TV and building them. And so I had the bug early on to want to be a pilot. But I just never thought I could do it as a kid. I thought that was an unreachable dream.
You know, it's funny you say that. I experienced the exact same thing. And we'll talk about that because I do think I'm curious how you navigated that. But for me, the fact that my lack of knowledge as to how to become a pilot translated into I can't do it for whatever reason, which I think gets a lot of people. But go on, we'll talk about that.
Well, for me, it was just my family's socioeconomic status. It was just kind of an impossible thing. There was nobody in my family anywhere that had anything near approaching the profession of being a pilot, and so we didn't know any pilots at all. No, not even private pilots. Definitely not a commercial airline pilot. And so that's the way it was when I grew up. My parents divorced when I was very young, and then about the time I was 14, my mom met this guy that was in the Air Force. He used to be a pilot, and they got married. And so I went off with my mom and him, and we lived at Andrews Air Force Base for a while, and he was only there for about 2 years or so before he retired. And when I was with him, he was never actively flying. He was doing all the staff work, administrative work.
So he met, or your mom met him after you already were like into planes, but you didn't think you could do it.
Right, didn't think I'd do it.
How cool was it that your mom's new boyfriend was a pilot?
It was cool. He had his jet helmet
That's awesome.
on the shelf, and there are photos of him getting in the different airplanes, and so it's kind of a cool thing. And
awesome.
we didn't talk that much about it though. But here I was living with this guy who had been a pilot, and got to know him very, very well because we're living together, and my stepdad. And so that's when it kind of hit me that it's possible I could do this, that it's not out of my realm.
And you're how old at this point?
So that was they married when I was 14.
Got it.
So 14, and then my senior year of college, I was trying to figure out what to do. It was senior of high school. Let me go backtrack. Senior of high school, trying to figure out what to do, and I was going to be on my own after that. And my high school counselor was spending time with me, the required time to be with all the different students. And I was thinking, well, maybe I'll just do one of these Control Data Institute things on the back of a matchbook cover where you go and you learn how to be a computer programmer. And that was big up and coming in 1974 when I graduated high school.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Whoa.
That was a big thing.
That must have been the ground floor if you got into that.
Well, it was back with key punch
Wow.
operators putting the cards into the machines a long time ago.
Whoa.
But he started he said, well, why don't you think about applying to the academies and to ROTC and get your college education that way? and rather than just going off and doing something like the Control Data Institute computer programmer. And so I took him to heart, and I went and applied to the academies and to ROTC. And anyway, I did not get accepted by the academies. You really needed to be sponsored by somebody, a congressman or someone else that had a little bit of a connection.
Huh.
And even though my stepdad was a colonel in the Air Force, he retired by then, and I didn't have any connections through him.
Wow. Is it still that way?
As far as I know. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's the same exact.
You apply, but it helps to have connections and all. And you definitely need to get sponsored by a congressman. That's how most of the appointments are done from what I recall. It's been a long time since I've looked at that. But so anyway, I also applied for ROTC Scholarship. That's Reserve Officer Training Corps. And anyway, at first I was turned down and said, well, you're going to be an alternate on this. And they just said, you don't have a scholarship. And so I was got a job at May Companies, and I was in the record radio department, and I was going to start off there. And then I guess just towards the I applied to UCLA, got accepted to UCLA because you had to be accepted at a college to get your scholarship. You couldn't the ROTC scholarship. You couldn't just get a scholarship without being accepted by some college. And so towards the end of the summer, when the school year was just starting, I got this letter in the mail saying, "Dear scholarship recipient." And I go, holy cow, I guess I must have, transitioned from being an alternate to getting a scholarship.
Whoa.
So I called them up, and they said, yeah, we've got one for you. And it's kind of a last-minute thing, so I was very, very lucky.
That's now, when you were thinking of, was the Air Force?
Yes.
So when you were thinking in that direction, were you the kid who grew up having a plane you wanted to fly? Did you want to fly fighters versus jet, just the large transport cargo jets, or were you just I just want to be a pilot and I'll do it this way?
I really had a calling to the fighter pilots.
Okay.
Yeah, to the fighter airplanes, and those were my favorite: the P-51, the P-40.
Got it.
Airplanes, and even the F-100, F-86. I like those.
Got it. So you were the kid who wanted to do that.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I wanted to fly the fighters.
Okay.
That was early on.
Okay, so you get accepted.
Yeah, so I got accepted. Talked to the my boss at May Company at the time said, "Oh no, well you don't want to go to CLA. You want to go to USC," and because I hadn't applied there. So I go in and talk to the ROTC guys, and the detachment was at USC. They didn't have one at UCLA at the time. And so I go talk to the guys at USC, and they say, okay, I got your scholarship and all this stuff. So I went, well, I'd like to go to this school. And so the guy said, well, it was late. They finished all the registration and everything. And the guy took me, he said, well, let's see if we can do. And so I had my transcript with me, and he took me up to the registrar's office and the dean of admissions, and talked to the guy and showed him my transcript. And right there, the guy gave me entrance into the school. I was accepted into college right then.
Into USC?
USC, yeah.
Cool.
So he called out to the secretary and said, write up a letter of acceptance for Paul Brown.
Love it.
So that's how that started. And then the captain I was with, he took me around and got all my classes set up. And I had no idea what I wanted to major in. And so I'm thinking, well, I want to be a pilot. Oh, and then on the scholarship, you have to take a number of tests before you get accepted for a scholarship. And some of the tests have to do with your flying ability. And they have some that are just photographs of different places on the ground taken from different angles, different seasons. You have to figure out which are photographs of the same place. And then they have the mechanical ones where you have a rope, you have a lever, you have some gears. And if you get there and there's a whole bunch of them, and if you pull on this rope, what happens way over at this other side?
Whoa.
Just kind of tell how your mechanical ability is, I suppose.
Now, at this point, have you done any flying?
No, I'd never flown before.
You've never flown? You don't have your private at this point? Nothing?
No, nothing.
Wow.
I had one flight in my life, and that was on Continental from San Antonio to California.
As a passenger?
As a passenger, as a kid.
Whoa. So up to that point, one flight. Was that pretty normal those days for people to not fly commercial a bunch?
Oh, yeah. It was expensive.
Expensive.
Yeah. It was much cheaper to drive across country than it would be to fly.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so in that case, my mom had just married my stepdad, and that's when we came here to Manhattan Beach, actually, and lived on Marine Avenue for 6 months.
Nice.
While he was at the place right here,
what do you call it?
It was back then. I think it was.
Was it by Seal Beach?
It's the one that was right here by El Segundo.
Okay, yeah. There's a thing, I forget the name of it.
LA Air Force Station.
Something.
Yeah. Anyway, so he was there 6 months, and then went off to Maryland.
Gotcha.
And, so I was here briefly, but that was my one and only flight.
Whoa. Now, when you were on that, how old were you on that flight?
Well, so I was 14.
So you remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Was it like, do you remember thinking, I want to be a pilot while on that plane, or not really? It wasn't a connection.
Well, I was thrilled, being on the airplane. But at that point in time, it was still out of my realm.
It was so out there,
so far away from anything I could do. I didn't even dream that I could be one.
You didn't even dare to dream it.
Yeah,
that's so funny because my dream. That's why I'm asking, because I vividly I know exact. As a kid, we flew a bunch, and I remember every time we reached our destination, we deplaned, and it was this big wide body, and the pilots were at the door thanking people. I don't know what came over me every time I saw those pilots. It was like I was watching God. It was weird, and it just happened again and again. Again, I don't think I dared at the time to think, I want to be a pilot, because it was so out of, it was just this craziest idea. But that's where, for me, it was the flying as a kid, as a passenger, seeing the pilots, that I was like, that's the coolest thing on the planet.
Yeah, very cool.
It's crazy. Yeah. Okay, so you flew once. That's insane. And then, so you go to college, to university.
And so they just asked me, what did I want to major in? And when they gave me the scholarship, it was for a pilot slot at the time. And so I knew right then when I got the scholarship that I was slated to be a pilot. And because they had all scholarships for navigators and for guys that were going to be in the missile command, and then other guys that were not going to be in any of those.
Wow.
And so I was very excited to have the scholarship to be a pilot. I mean, that was the first big thing. And so I didn't know what major to pick, so I picked aerospace engineering because that was the closest to being a pilot over there.
That's not a small feat.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's how I got started off in college doing that.
That's awesome. So you do college for 4 years?
4 years, right.
When do you start flying?
So I started flying in the fall semester of my senior year. So right at the beginning of my senior year. That back then the Air Force, ROTC, had a program called the Flight Instruction Program, and it was to see how capable the future pilots really are. And it was a weeding out process. And so the Air Force paid for 25 hours, and if I remember correctly, we had to solo by the 11th hour.
You had to?
Yes.
And that meant, so they did their best to prepare you, but if you couldn't hold on, you would drop out.
Right.
Whoa.
And so I went, it was right here at Hawthorne Airport, where I flew, great instructor, and it was on a Piper Cherokee 140, and if you didn't solo by the 11th hour, then you were out. That you were not going to be a pilot. Well, the thing is, you look at it that the Air Force, they have 1 year when you go with the Air Force pilot training to get you through the entire program and you earn your wings as a pilot in the Air Force. And if somebody takes a lot of extra time to get there, it's just not going to work out well for the Air Force because they're not going to be able to stay with their class. Because when you start with a class, normally unless you have some kind of a physical problem, which keeps you from flying for a few weeks or a few months, you're going to go with that class all the way through. They have the program, and you got to follow the program and graduate and get your wings. And so in the ROTC, that FIP program was just to see if the person really has the capability to be a pilot. And to be a pilot and set amount of time that they can learn.
Now, when you soloed at around 11 hours, did you feel ready?
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You did just a few patterns?
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then they still paid for the rest of the time for the 25 hours, so I got to fly up, and I just go circle around the Queen Mary or just fly around the area. And then after the 25 hours was done, that was it. I didn't fly again until I went to pilot training.
Wow. So here you are, someone who's never flown. You're solo in 11 hours. That's pretty cool. I mean, if you think about today's stand, I'm sure there's people who saw at 11. But I think things have changed a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't followed it.
Maybe the Air Force is still that way. I'm not sure. Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Okay, so you do the 25, and then what's next in your flying?
Oh, well, so as far as in my career, by now, having been right there in the midst of the Air Force while I'm going through college and being ROTC, we would have the ROTC programs every week. And in between my sophomore and junior year, I went to a summer camp and learned more about the Air Force, and then went to another program between my junior and senior year. And I really got to know a lot about the Air Force. And I was thinking, well, I'd like to be a test pilot. And having the aerospace engineering background, that'd be pretty good.
Now, what was it about the test pilots or being a test pilot that appealed to you?
Just kind of an exciting, fun thing to do.
Just like the idea that you'll be the one out there.
Yeah, out there. Yeah, it'd be something, fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And anyway, so in my senior year, I took an extra class that I didn't have to. It was a graduate level class. And then and during the summer, I took 2 other graduate level classes. One of them was there at SC. I paid for myself. And the other one was at Cal State LA. I paid for myself. Modern Control Theory. Remember that one? I think that was it. And anyway, when I graduated college, I had 11 months before I went to pilot training. And what was I going to do with that 11 months? And I kind of got this idea from a guy who was 2 years ahead of me who did a similar thing when he had a delay. And what I did is I applied to USC to get a research assistantship and a teaching assistantship, and they gave me one.
Wow.
And that's another story in itself where it was a last-minute thing that I didn't find out that I was going to be delayed 11 months until quite late in the year towards my graduation. And the day I found out, I went to the Aerospace Engineering Department, talked to the secretary there, and I said, hey, I remember hearing about these not a scholarship, but these stipends are going to be given to people that were accepted into the program to be a teaching assistant or a research assistant for the professors here. And she says, well, that closed a few weeks ago, but the chairman of the department, Dr. Loffer, I think was his name, hasn't looked at them yet, and he's going to look at them today during lunch. And it was probably about 8 o'clock in the morning. I went by her office. She said, if you could have an application written, an essay on why you want to have this teaching assistantship and research assistantship, and give me 3 letters of recommendation by lunch, I'll go ahead and I'll submit it with everybody else's. And geez, that's going to be damn hard. So I went back to my fraternity, sat down, wrote the essay, did the application. I got there and I went to ROTC department, had captain there write a letter of recommendation for me. I went, tracked down 2 of my professors and asked them if they would just give a verbal recommendation to Dr. Loffer. And I did all this between that morning and
the afternoon
and the lunchtime. And I was rushing around. But anyway, so about a couple weeks later, I got the word that, okay, you've got this TA-ship where you're now a teaching assistant, research assistantship, and we'll pay for your classes to get a master's degree.
Wow.
So I used the one class I took in my senior year and And then I knew I had to take those 2 classes in the summer. And then I got that, and I took 6 classes in the fall semester, and I got my master's in aerospace engineering.
Wow.
After that first semester.
That's huge.
That was pretty good.
That is huge.
And that was because I knew I wanted to be a test pilot. And to be a test pilot, it really helps to have an advanced degree. And I would say 90%.
Specifically in engineering.
It helps. Engineering, math, sciences, one of those things. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Wow, look at you. So you went from not even daring to want to be a pilot to doing what you've done.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely crazy. Wow. So you do that, and then you become a test pilot?
No.
So that's it.
Eventually, I did, but no. It's a process. Yeah,
Got
it's
it.
definitely a process.
Would you say it's hard to become a test pilot, or is it just they're selective? Like,
it's very selective. Yeah,
got it.
I was very fortunate to be selected. It's a very, very small group of people.
What do they look for? What qualities make a good test pilot?
Well, so that's one thing that I had learned early on, is that they want to have an advanced degree, and so that's why I got one. And you have to do well in the classes, all right. And they want you to have experience flying different airplanes. And so that was one thing in my Air Force career. I thought, well, I chose my career path to get at least 2 different types of airplanes, which would make it easier. That's more beneficial on the application. And then you just have to do well on your check rides. We would have a number of check rides, and so I always try to do my best.
Wow. What planes did you fly?
So after pilot training, and also doing well, I tried to do as well as I could. In the Air Force, they have what's it called? I guess a system where they award the top graduates with the distinguished graduate rating. And so I got there, and I was got that in a number of different programs, which helped out. But I was very high in my class, my pilot training class, and so I got my first choice, which was a T-38, and as an instructor. A lot of people didn't like that because you're being an instructor and you're watching other people fly. But at the time, the guys were getting a lot of flying time. And it's another thing, to be a test pilot, you have to have a lot of flying time too. And so in the 3 years I was there, I got 1,400 hours, which it's a lot of time. After my 3 years as a instructor pilot at Columbus, Mississippi, I was time to leave, and at that time they were closing up on the different fighters that guys could get, and that's what I wanted. I knew I wanted a fighter.
Do you have a specific jet you wanted to fly?
Well, I wanted to fly one of the new ones, F-15, F-16.
Got it.
That was it. But there were none available when it was my turn.
Man.
They had a lot of helicopters, believe it or not, or C-130s and a lot of 135s. And so when I got an F-4, an old Vietnam-era fighter, I was ecstatic.
Good for you.
Yeah, I was very, very ecstatic.
You got your fighter.
So I got my fighter, so I get my flying time in a different kind of airplane. And on that one, that was tough. So I got 1,400 hours in 3 years on the T-38, flying as much as I could. And the F-4, I tried to fly as much as possible too, but I was only getting about 200 hours a year on that.
So as someone who's flown, God, you've probably flown, 20 different types of planes in your entire life?
More.
More.
Yeah.
So as someone who's flown more than 20 different planes.
It's about 70.
70 planes, because you're a test pilot.
Yeah. That's being a test pilot is really, in my 1 year of the test pilot school, I flew 25 airplanes in that 1 year, different types. Everything from a little Schweitzer 233 glider to the B-52.
Whoa.
Flew F-104, which is an old Century Series fighter in 1950s and all.
You've done them all.
I had a lot of experience. Got to fly some helicopters.
Wow, so you're a helicopter guy too.
Even got to fly the Goodyear blimp.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I see it all the time flying around.
Yeah, it was right out of here.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. How deep do they expect your knowledge of the planes you fly as a test pilot, their systems, and how deep does your knowledge have to be?
Well, that depends.
That seemed like a lot to
so
study.
Like I said, it just depends. When I was in Italy, for instance, I went to the Italian test center, Pratica di Mare near Rome, and we met in the morning in this their briefing room and kind of making all these introductions between the U.S. Test pilots at the school and the Italian test pilots over there. And we had one Italian exchange test pilot in my class and an engineer from Italy in my class. And that's why we chose to go there during our field trip during my 1 year at test pilot school. So we're over there, and we're getting the introductions, and I meet this the one pilot. Said, okay, he's with the Rotc 339. He's the Italian demonstration pilot for that airplane, and you're going to go with him. So let's start heading out. And that was it. So we're walking out to first we go, and I have to get the G-suits and the harness and things like that we need. I have my own helmet, and the connections all fit, so that was good. And then we're just walking out to the airplane, and I'm start asking them, things. What's the rotate speed? What's the G limits on the airplane? And I just hop in the front seat, and he's there and showing me the switches. I love that airplane. It was ergonomically, it was just a beautiful design, beautiful layout, a lot of power on that airplane, even without an afterburner, a lot of power. It's one of my favorite airplanes ever flew.
Wow.
And but that's how it is. We just talk about it walking out to the airplane, and then he's sitting in the back and talking me through how to do things. And when I was also an instructor in the F-4 and the F-16, and when I was at Edwards, I was a test pilot school instructor for a while. And I would do the same thing where people would come over. We'd have foreign test pilots come over, or the Navy guys would come over, and they'd hop in the front seat of the F-16, and I would be in the back seat, and we don't have all the same controls. And what I would do is I would just talk them through where to put their hands and what switches to. So
you could you fully control the F-16 from the back seat or no?
There were some things I could not.
Like what?
I'm trying to remember. Most of the things I could. As far as starting the airplane, I had to start it up there.
Got it. But critical things, and to land the plane, you can land the plane.
Yeah. There'd be a landing gear and the flap handles and the throttle and the stick and all that in the back. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, you could do it. You could take control.
Wow. So they were in the front, and you were walking them through the stuff on the F-16.
Yeah. And so the guy with the Rotc 339 was doing the same thing, where he'd be in the back and he'd just kind of tell me how to do it, and off we went to go fly. So that's one example. And now the other example, I went and I flew the A-10 and I flew the A-7. And those airplanes, those are both Air Force attack airplanes, jet fighters. And there's no two-seat versions around.
Just one.
Just one, yeah. And so on that one, we have the flight manual. It's called a -1 for each particular airplane, the -1. And so I was given the -1 for the airplane and had to read through the -1, learn how to operate the systems, learn how to do it all, then had to take a test. There's all the immediate action items you have to know how to do in case there's a fire or some hydraulic failure or something where you don't have time to refer to the checklist. You have stuff memorized. And so take the test, and then I could go fly.
Wow. So
that took
opposite ends of the spectrum.
Right. So one of them I could just walk out there with another guy, and he'd help me. But if there's no other guy to walk out with,
that makes sense.
Then you got to know how to do it all yourself. But once again, it was just all up to my own to go get checked out or to learn how to fly the airplane.
So there was no checkout. Oh, there was just the test.
Well, there was academic tests. And both, the A-7, when I did take off, there was an instructor flying another airplane next to me.
That's interesting because if there's no two seats, your first time you fly the airplane, you're alone.
Right, you're alone. And the same thing with the A-10, that, on that one taking off the first time, there's an instructor next to me, and he's, next to you, flying by you, but there's nothing he can do to help you out. You're in the airplane by yourself.
You're on your own.
So you better know how to operate the airplane and what to do in an emergency.
Wow.
Yeah.
But then I'm sure at that point, having flown all the planes you've flown, planes, like the speed change, the speeds are different, but pretty much a plane is a plane is a plane.
There are a lot of differences, actually. But
so it's more than that.
Yeah, but still, if you can fly, you can fly.
If you can fly, you can fly. That's all. So what would you say to someone like myself? I've never flown a fighter jet. What's the main difference that you realize between flying fighters and non-fighter airplanes, if there is one?
Well, as far as non-fighter, there's a lot of non-fighter. I mean, like let's say a small civilian airplane like a Cessna 152 or 172.
Like a jet. So like the jets you've flown at the airlines, like an airliner jet or like a fighter jet, just in terms of a fighter jet being, because I read and I watched a bunch of stuff like aerodynamically or stability-wise, they're like smack opposite, no?
Well, the fighters actually aren't that bad. You can have a very high wing loading on the fighters, and they'll be very stable. They're kind of rock solid in turbulence. You'll feel the bumps, and the turbulence don't like that. They're much more maneuverable, which they have to be for the mission they're doing.
So the wings are less likely to bend and break.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah, and because you're definitely pulling more G's on that. With a airliner, you're normally those are built about 2.5 G's. And the F-16 was a 9G airplane. The F-4 was 8.5G airplane, and we wouldn't go up to 8.5 G's in the F-4, but we'd routinely go to 6. And the F-16, I'd go to 9 G's all the time.
What's the highest G you've gone to? 9.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Oh, it hurts. It's a lot. I would go up on the F-16, and one thing with all that pressure, you got everything is 9 times the weight. And so my 20-pound head or whatever it is, now weighs 180 pounds. I got the helmet on top of that, and also there's the pressure straining to try and keep the blood from pooling in your extremities, and so you don't lose your vision and don't lose your consciousness.
How would that happen? So I'm pulling 9 Gs. What does my blood want to do?
Oh, the gravity wants to pull it down to your lower part of your body, your legs.
At 9 times the force it otherwise would.
Yeah, you have the gravity pulling everything down. You're pulling all your internal organs down, just pulling everything. And so in the Air Force, the fighters, they have G suits, and
what does that do?
So the G suits, they look kind of like cowboy chaps, where you put them around your legs. And there's also a bladder on your abdomen, and it's got a hose hooked up to it that you plug into the airplane. And in the G suit are bladders that inflate with air, and so as you pull the Gs, these bladders inflate and they squeeze your legs, they squeeze your abdomen to try and prevent the blood from pooling down there.
Oh, so is it similar to when you go and have blood drawn?
A blood pressure cuff. So
Gotcha.
it inflates up in there. Same thing. Imagine that on your legs and on your abdomen.
Okay.
And then also there was a maneuver where we'd get there and tense our muscles and strain and try and increase our blood pressure in our body to keep it from going down. And you get there and you got, if I remember, it's been so many years I'm done. I haven't flown fighters in 30 years now. I tell you, I figure it was an M1 or G1. I'm sorry about that, but you get there, you strain.
You got to squeeze.
Yeah, you just strain your body, and
so the squeezing is basically in addition to what the suit is doing to you.
Right. Yeah.
So you're trying to get as much squeeze from anywhere you can take
anywhere,
it from.
Just your entire body squeezing, just to keep the blood up there.
And that will prevent you from hopefully passing out.
Right. Yeah, passing out's a bad thing. We lost a lot of F-16 pilots early on
because they passed out.
G-induced loss of consciousness. Because one thing about the F-16 is you could get to 9 Gs so rapidly that guys would get there and they wouldn't have time to really get into the proper maneuver to strain and resist the Gs, and they would just lose consciousness.
Wow.
And the airplane, you have they'd fly into the ground.
So I've watched some. I mean, most people probably have watched Blue Angel rides that they take passengers in the back, and you see the passengers passing out when they pull too many Gs. That's like brutal to look at. It's kind of cringy to see someone just pass out like that. Yeah. It's the weirdest thing to think that the pilot would do it. But then would you typically, so let's say someone passes out, would you typically wake up on your own, or does someone need to wake you up?
You'd wake up on your own, yeah.
How many minutes after?
It could happen just like a few seconds later.
When the blood comes back.
Yeah, but it just, if you're flying 500 miles an hour, it doesn't take long, to travel a long distance, especially if you're heading downhill towards the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not as much the pilot passing out as much as it is them not coming back to consciousness in time? Or it is a problem to pass out?
You don't want to pass out at all.
Gotcha.
Yeah, when you're flying, you don't want to pass out. The first thing happens is you lose your vision. You start getting tunnel vision where you lose your peripheral vision and just kind of narrows down, so you're looking through a soda straw. So you get a little bit of a warning. And that's if you're doing a gradual onset of G's. If it's really rapid, it could happen very, very fast, like I mentioned.
Wow. Is that part of training? Like they put you through it and you just need to try to not pass out?
Right. So when I got checked out in the F-16 before I became a test pilot, I went through a checkout program at Luke, learning how to fly the airplane, and with simulators. And one of the things they had there was centrifuge. And
what's that?
Okay, centrifuge. They put you in something looks like a cockpit, or just a rudimentary cockpit.
Oh, and it rotates
and
fast
it's on
in a room?
big long arm, yes, and just spins you around, and you can get up to 9 Gs in that thing.
I've seen videos.
And so I have video of myself when I was going through my training, and you have to be able to withstand the 9 Gs, and I forget if it was 20 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that you're straining doing the maneuver. And trying to keep conscious and be able to function. And if you can't do that, then you can't fly the airplane.
God, that sucks. So I'm assuming the G training is something they do semi-early on because there's no point in spending money on training you just to later find out you can't handle Gs.
Right. With the guys that were I say on the line, that's an airline term, but the guys that were operational in the F-16, I don't know where it was in their training that they got the centrifuge. But you're right, that was probably early on, I think.
Is handling Gs something you could train and get better at, or are you either naturally gifted with it or not?
Oh, you definitely train to get better. They would teach us how to do the maneuver properly. And that was one thing about the centrifuge training, was teaching you how to get there and do the maneuver and to keep conscious under high G.
So there's a way to get better at it.
And some guys are better at it naturally than others. And so, good for them. And other guys, if you were short, stocky, looked like a fire plug, then your body physically was much better at withstanding Gs.
That's
guys
so
that are tall and thin, not as easy for those guys.
So for you, it was a stretch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it was not easy for me. I remember I've looked at those videos of me in the centrifuge, and that was hard.
But you got better at it. Eventually, you reached a point where it's like, okay, I could. Do you ever reach a point? I know 9 Gs is insane. Do you ever reach a point where you're like, okay, bring it on anytime 9 Gs, I got it? Or is it always like a difficult thing to stay conscious under 9 Gs?
Oh, you're always working at it.
Always.
Yeah, always working at it, yeah.
So you never get to a point where you're good enough and you go, I could handle it.
Well, you can handle it, but you're just used to it. You know what to do.
Got it.
Yeah. And so you'd go and you do the 9 Gs, and you do it enough, that you're used to it, and so you know how to sustain the 9 Gs on your body.
That's incredible. Yeah. Do you start squeezing? When do you start squeezing? Before you even begin turning the airplane, or during?
Right at the onset, just a little bit before.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you want to lead it.
Yeah, if you can lead it, it's good.
Fascinating stuff. Yeah. Whoa. Okay, so we could talk about the Air Force for days, but then, so how many years do you spend? Is that the majority of what you did in the Air Force test pilot?
I was an active test pilot for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, when I graduated from test pilot school, went to a place they called Test Ops, Test Squadron. I was there for about 8 months, and I did some little small tests on F-4s, but I did a lot of safety chase and photo chase and things like that, waiting for my time to go to a test squadron. And a spot opened up, so I went to F-16 Test Squadron. And they told me that the day I walked in the door, you're going to be here 2 years, and then you're leaving. And sure enough, I was there 2 years, and I was out. And
whoa.
Yeah, and my next time, and back then, I could see what my career progression was going to be. I could just look at everybody ahead of me, and they were all doing the same thing. They graduate test pilot school, they'd go to test ops for the most part, then they'd go to a test squadron, and everybody's 2 years of the test squadron, And then most guys end up going back to the test pilot school as an instructor. And so I said, okay, well, that's on my horizon. So yeah, after 2 years flying the F-16, doing the tests there, then I went back to the test pilot school, and this time as an instructor.
Wow. So it sounds like a lot of movement, meaning you moved from place to place.
Well, all that was at the same place, Edwards Air Force Base.
Same place.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So it was just different departments doing different things.
Yeah, different parts of the base. Yeah.
I got it. Okay. So it's not typical, or is it, if someone joins the Air Force, to expect to be moving every few years?
Oh, it's typical.
It is typical.
Yeah.
Got it.
And I probably moved one of the least of most people. I was just at 4 bases in my 13 and a half years.
At the Air Force.
And some guys are moving on average every 2 years, if not more.
Wow. Yeah. At this point in the Air Force, or just looking back, was the Air Force experience anything remotely close to what you thought it was as a 17-year-old, or thought it would be in hindsight?
Well, so when I was in ROTC, my experience in the Air Force, was pretty close to what I was expecting once I was in ROTC. But before that, I really had no idea what it was going to be like. I didn't even know what to expect.
You were like, I'm just, whatever comes.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Tess, I love it. So you do 13 and a half years. Do you go to the airlines during or when you're done with the Air Force?
Well, so after my time as a instructor at test pilot school, I could see what everybody else was doing after me. And they were going to 1 year of staff college in Ohio and just learn how to be a staff officer. And then they would go for another 3 years doing staff work somewhere. And
what is staff work?
It's being an office administrator.
Oh, why would you want to do that?
Right. I didn't want to do that.
Okay.
So I was looking at that and going to Ohio, well, no, I don't really want to do that. And I'd always known that the airlines was a good place to be, fairly good profession. And so I kept up my logbooks the entire time I was in the Air Force, civilian logbook.
So every flight, you're like...
Every flight. I wrote down my time and what I did and everything. It's kind of nice going back now and look at that, and see all the different airplanes and stuff and what I did. But so I had all that, and it was in my mind. I wanted to do that. I wanted to be an airline pilot. And now the thing is, was it going to be after 20 years in the Air Force, or was it going to be, sometime before that?
Now, how old are you at this point?
So at this point, I'm about 35.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I'm looking at it and say, well, I don't want to go and sit behind a desk for 4 years, because by then I'll be getting one of the last few years before I hit my 20-year point, and I don't know whether I'll be able to get a flying job or not after that. I would certainly hope so, but no guarantee. And trying to get on with the airlines without flying in the recent history would be kind of tough.
Right.
And plus I'd be much older. My wife at the time was a tenured professor up there in Lancaster. My kids were established in school. We had a good home there. I thought, well, now might be the time to see if I can get an airline job. And so
this is what year?
This was in 92.
92.
Yeah.
As far as you can remember, you probably can remember, because, when you apply, you're aware of what was the airline climate like back then in terms of, right now, even with COVID, it's insane, like the shortage that airlines are experiencing. What was it like back then?
It was not that way back then.
Different.
Yeah, it was hard to get an airline job. That there had not been much hiring for a while. There was a big surge in hiring, 85 to 90 or so, and then it stopped for a while. And they started up again a little bit, but it was not a huge amount of hiring. And so I blanketed everybody with applications, sent them to all. And
which I know you're a big fan of.
What's that?
You just send applications to everyone.
Oh, yeah. That's
every single airline.
Absolutely everybody.
Yes. And
so I was actually in France flying the Mirage 2000 and the Alpha Jet when I got notified that Alaska Airlines wanted me to come in.
Who were you flying the Mirage with?
It was the French Flight Test Center.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
just doing your thing.
Yeah, just doing more exchange stuff and all.
So you sent your application to, I don't know, 10 airlines?
I don't remember how many, but a lot. All the majors.
And Alaska reaches out.
Yeah, and so they reach out, and so I came back to the U.S. and went straight up for an interview and talked them up there, and they hired me on the spot. They said, "Can you start next week?" I go, "Okay, well," I had to come back there Air Force, and I was supposed to be getting out at the end of '92, and this is in May.
Okay.
And so I knew that seniority is everything. You get a job with an airline, you take it, as soon as you can.
Right.
And so I had a lot of vacation, we call it leave, in the Air Force saved up. And so what I did is I went back to the Air Force, and I had enough leave to cover me for about 2 months. All right. And I got them to move my separation from the Air Force from the end of the year, December 31st, up until when my leave ran out, which was in August. And so I out-processed when I got back, and then went up to Seattle and started my train in May.
Wow.
Right away.
And what plane was it, the 7-2?
It was a 727, only 6 guys in my class. All of us were flight engineers. And
that was typical. That was So back then, when you get on with an airline, you'd be an engineer.
Yeah, right.
Not a first officer.
Right, yeah.
Whoa. So we have it good today that you go straight
great.
to the controls.
I just saw that some guys are going straight to a wide body FO, 777 FO, right?
Wow.
New hire, which is just unimaginable. Normally there were some guys at Alaska, the class ahead of me. Those guys went to the right seat of the 27.
Yeah.
But in my class, all 6 of us.
The thing closer to your.
Okay.
Feel free to.
All right. But in my class, everybody was just a 27 engineer.
Wow.
And that, I got to tell you about the Alaska, though. I finished all the ground training, all the simulator training, and now I was ready to go off and do my flight training as an engineer to finally, get released and go off on the line. And just about a couple of days before my first flight training to finish up my first flight to finish up the training, I've got this certified letter come via FedEx, and it's a furlough notice from Alaska.
You didn't even start.
Yeah, I didn't even start flying yet for them. Just finished the training.
What happened?
Well, they were going through negotiations, and they wanted concessions, and so there was kind of like a threatening thing. But the manager was saying they needed to downsize, and they were going to furlough us. And so that was really disheartening that I'd given up this great career in the Air Force. I could have stayed there, and taken Alaska. Now here I am. I don't have the Air Force career to fall back on, and I'm going to be gone in a month. It was be furloughed in a month.
Oh my gosh, that's tough.
It was bad. I was not happy about that, obviously, and I had wife, 2 kids, a lot of responsibility.
I can't imagine.
And that's hazards with the airlines. That on a whim, out of the blue, boom, you're furloughed. It's happened to thousands of people a number of times. Anyway, we got within about a week of the furlough, and they canceled it. And I was ecstatic.
Wow.
And now right about this time after that first cancellation, I got notified by United that they want me to come and start interviewing the process.
Because you sent an app to them as well.
To everybody. It just took them that long to get to me. And
so you sent an app to everyone. Alaska calls you. You go through training to become a flight engineer. You get furloughed.
Well, I wasn't furloughed.
Right, and then it cancels.
Yeah.
And then United contacts you.
Right. And so with the United back then, it was a 3-month process for the interview. You would go to Denver 3 times.
The interview is 3 months.
Well, the whole process to be hired. So you'd go to Denver 3 times. What I remember, the interview, they had a simulator ride you had to take, and then I think a final interview or a medical. You had to go there for a medical also, evaluation.
And all that took 3 months?
All that, yes.
Was it on purpose, 3 months, or?
It's just the way it was. I don't know why they did it that way. It's much quicker now, which is better for the guys. But so anyway, they'd started the process, and I was very happy about that. And so everything's great at Alaska. We're not going to be furloughed, but I was not liking being an engineer at all.
But wouldn't you be an engineer at United?
Most likely, yeah. But I was not liking being an engineer like with any airline. I'm kind of getting second thoughts about this because I had been flying some great airplanes in the Air Force.
Talk about a downgrade.
Oh, huge. There are many days when I was in the Air Force that I'd come home and I'd tell my wife at the time that I would have paid money to do what I did today.
Wow.
Just incredible things that we got to do in the Air Force. And being an engineer, you're sitting in the back, and I would do the takeoff data. I would do the walk around of the airplane. And on the 27, I'd be the auto throttle.
So you're the bottom of the totem pole.
Right, the absolute bottom. And they didn't even give me approach plates. So when the guys are up there flying approach, I had no idea what they were doing. And I'm just kind of sitting back there. And I was really treated like a third-class citizen in the back. Like I mentioned, the guys in the class ahead of me, they were went straight to the right seat flying, and even though they were just hired 1 week before me. And a couple of those guys just had a huge ego on their head, and they were putting us down. The guys in my class were flying as engineers with them and doing the training just left and right. And I never really told them about my background, my history, but it's just not right to do that. And I was a little ticked off about that.
Whoa.
But anyway, so Alaska, I'm not feeling good about that, but I'm going to go ahead and stick with it. And about a month after that cancellation, we get another furlough notice.
So did you start flying? You started flying?
Well, yeah. So now I'm flying with Alaska as an engineer, and got to do some interesting stuff flying. Back then, they just went up and down the coast. As far as I didn't think they did San Diego, just LAX might have been as far south, and then up to Alaska. They did have some flights to Russia at the time.
Oh, you were one of those.
I never got to do it, but I got my Russian visa, but that was very senior, as you can imagine.
Wow.
So,
where were you based?
Seattle.
Okay.
And so I was commuting from Palmdale up to Seattle, which also was not easy. And I was on reserve, and so back then we had the pagers, and you had to be within, I think, 2 hours of departure, something like that, to be able to show up. It was on a very short leash.
Whoa.
So I had now another furlough notice. I'm going to be going, and that's not so good. I'm just not very happy there with this second furlough notice.
The whole furlough stuff.
Yeah. And then they got there and they postponed that second furlough for another month. Said, okay, well, we're going to give you, let's slide another month. And meanwhile, I'm still going through this interview process now with United. I've been there a couple times, 3 times. And so now I'm getting close to this furlough. It's going to happen at the end of November. I'm done. I'm going to be furloughed at Alaska. And I think it was about 10 days before the end of the month, around the 20th, 21st, something, about the 20th, that I'm on a trip. And I get a message to call back home. So I call back home. I'm in the jetway, and they say, hey, United, why don't you give them a call right now? So I'm in the jetway. I think it was in Portland at the time, and I call up United. They say, this is on a Thursday. I think it was, Thursday. They said, hey, can you start on Monday? I said, absolutely, I can start on Monday.
My gosh.
Yeah, because I was going to be furloughed within 10 days. So I finished the trip the next day, got back to Seattle on Friday, and went into the chief pilot's office, and I explained to him, hey, I've got an offer from United, and you guys are going to furlough me here in the end of the month, and I need to type up a resignation of my seniority number with you guys and turn in my books and get on my way. He said, I don't blame you. I would do the exact same thing.
Wow.
So I typed up my letter on his typewriter and gave him a copy and took it with me because United wanted a copy of that. Packed up my car. We were all set to turn in the apartment. I had an apartment with 2 other guys, and so we had rented furniture, and everything was all set to be done at the end of the month because we were going to be furloughed. And so I just packed up my car and started driving and got to Denver Sunday night before classes started on Monday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. And you haven't looked back since. Like that was it. That was your airline.
That was it, yeah. And now with my so my experience at Alaska could have been better. As it was, they didn't furlough anybody. So in that last hour there, by the last day before, they were going to furlough the other 5 guys remaining in my class. And that varied between the 3 furlough notices I had. It was either going to be just my class, only 6 guys, or it was going to be about 150, 200 guys. It kind of fluctuated back and forth. And I don't remember on the last one how many were in that, but I just knew I was affected.
Whoa. So what was that about? It was like an intimidation thing for contract negotiations?
Right. That's they ended up not furloughing anybody, and they wanted concessions from the pilots, and they got them. They got the concessions.
Man, the shady practices of the airline industry.
That's life. Yeah.
Wow. So you go to what plane do you start on at United?
Okay. So at Alaska, I was commuting to Seattle to sit as a 727 engineer, and I go to Denver, and I don't know if it's the first or second day. There are about 33 people in my class, and they say, okay, these are the airplanes you guys are going to have. And we have 727 engineers, DC-10 engineers, and then 737 right seat. And then all over the system, L.A., San Francisco, Chicago, Dulles, I think, and then New York. It wasn't Newark at the time, so I guess, Kennedy.
And these were like available bases?
These were available, yeah, for us, and Denver. And so I'm looking, and they rank ordered us in our class by our Social Security number, and I was number 3. And I looked there, and they had 3 737s to L.A.
Whoa!
Dream assignment, and so I knew if I was number 3, I had one. I had,
Done.
And I was ecstatic, and no more commuting, being able to actually, fly, sit up front. And,
so this is FO?
Yeah, as an FO,
not engineer.
No, 737. So, no engineers in these 737s.
Oh, so no 737 had an engineer.
At one point in time, they did.
Got it.
But that's another story. That was a long time ago.
So there was no engineer seat. It was just FO and captain.
FO, yeah. Well, there were some others, other airplanes in my class, and some guys wanted that. A lot of them did, but I just wanted to be in L.A.
Right.
And so I remember they didn't have 727s in L.A., and I wanted to fly anyway. I had my fill of being a 727 engineer.
Wow.
And so I was, from day one of United, I was just ecstatic, very happy. Yeah.
That's insane. So you do that, and then you've been in L.A. your whole career then?
I've had a few stints up to San Fran.
I gotcha.
Yeah, just usually transitioning to a new airplane. And except this last time, I was, right before I retired, I was up there commuting to San Francisco for 2 years. And just because of flying so much better up there than Los Angeles.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah.
What do you mean by better?
As in much better destinations to fly to.
Oh.
A lot more. It's a bigger base. In L.A., I started off flying there on the 787, which is what I retired on. And we had Sydney and Melbourne, Singapore, Shanghai,
and this is
London.
San Francisco, you said, or
This
LA?
is L.A.
LA.
Yeah. But that was at the beginning when I started flying in the 787 there. Towards the end, it went to domestic only for a while, and then ended up where just Sydney and London.
On the 787.
On the 787. And up in San Francisco, they ended up getting the Melbourne flights. So then they had Sydney and Melbourne and Singapore and Seoul and Tokyo, Shanghai, Tel Aviv, London, and a few others. I just did so much more flying up out of
So that's what you
San
were
Francisco.
after. You wanted to go all over the place.
And also like Tahiti is another one too. Auckland, New Zealand, up there. Yeah.
Wow.
So a lot more destinations. So much better flying.
And at that point, you didn't mind commuting because you were more senior, right. And it was more comfortable.
Right.
Wow. So I'm assuming the 737, I don't know what other planes you've flown with United only domestically, but you've done, I'm sure, a lot of like domestic periods in your career and then international. So
my first was about 9 years at the airline. I was flying the 737, the 757, 767. And so I did those. Was a 737 captain, did that for a couple years. And then after September 11th, there was a lot of furloughs, and I ended up getting kicked off the 737 captain as a shuttle captain, and they just got rid of the 737 shuttle. And so then I went to wide-body flying, and flying international, and that was in the 777.
Is there a big difference flying a wide body and a narrow body, or from the cockpit's perspective, it's an airplane?
There are minor differences. There's more similarities than there are differences. The airplanes fly different. You got to land them different.
Wow.
But the procedures are pretty much the same. When you're flying international over the water, there's a lot of other different things to do. But as far as loading the flight management computer and the manipulation of controls, it's all pretty much the same. Yeah, some things like the 737. I love the way that flew. Is more like a little sports car than
really?
The bigger ones. Yeah.
What variants did you fly?
At United?
Yeah, the 73s.
Oh, just flew the 737-300 and 500 at the time.
So those are classics.
Yeah, they are now. At the time, they weren't
for
me.
Brand new.
Yeah, at the time I was flying brand new ones.
That's funny because they don't build them new and say this is a classic.
Yeah.
But it ends up being a classic. That's funny. Yeah, because Alaska had 400s there for a long while. They just retired them a few years ago. So as someone who's flown a lot of domestic and international, I'm assuming international ended up being your cup of tea.
It did.
Because you ended up doing that. What would you say is the main different? I mean, I'm sure it's all different. Like you live on the backside of the clock, you're jet lagged. I mean, so I guess what about it appealed to you other than going to see the world? What about it is sitting there for 12 hours appealing?
Other than getting to see the world, which was a great thing, seeing all these cities all over the place.
I bet.
It's the efficiency of my time. And I mentioned I was, the 737 shuttle captain for a while doing domestic flying around. And that was really great because we had a nice, efficient day. We would get there and we would do up to 6 legs in one day. That was kind of rare. Normally it's about 4 legs a day, but
That's
up
a
to
lot.
6. But you would stay with the same airplane. You'd stay with the same flight attendants. And we would avoid the major hubs like San Francisco or LA. We'd be flying the shorter places back and forth, and you could turn the airplane quickly. And so it was very efficient. You spent most of your day flying and very little time sitting around. They got rid of the shuttle, and then I would go to Denver, and I'd be switching out flight attendants, be switching out airplanes, sitting there waiting 3 hours. But the airplane that's coming in is late, or the flight attendants are late. And then from there go to some other destination, finally get there. I arrive maybe an hour late, hour and a half late, something like that. And I've had a good long 12-hour day, and I've earned 5 hours of pay for that.
Yeah, I hear you.
And, that I just didn't like that. And then with the international flying, so let's say like a place like Sydney, fly down to Sydney, it's 14 hours of pay going down there in one day. And with Sydney, I would fly down there, have about 25 hours on the ground, really, something like that, 25, 28. At the hotel, you're looking at about maybe 24, 25 hours, actually. And then turn around and come back. And it's been a while now, I'm trying to remember, but I think for that trip, we'd get paid 28 hours, which is good for a 4-day trip.
Wow.
So you get 28 hours pay for a 4-day trip, but we'd leave late in the evening. It was typically around a 10 o'clock departure, 10:30 departure at night.
Because you're going back in time.
Just to arrive there in the morning for them. And then we would arrive back here in the morning about 6 o'clock in the morning and on day 4. So you're leaving late on day 1, getting back very early on day 4. So you're really only on day 2 and 3 and a little bit of 1 and 4. And so I think I might have been gone 60 hours time away from base, and I'm getting paid for about half of that, 28 hours pay.
Wow.
Which is really good. So that's efficient flying. So when my car's in the parking lot, I want to be earning money. And you're not earning money when you're sitting at a gate waiting for the airplane to come in, or you're sitting on the airplane twiddling thumbs waiting for the flight attendants to make their connection and show up. Or if you're on a layover, sitting, you're just getting paid per diem most of the time. And that's it. It's not a lot of per diem. So
that's incredible. I didn't think so. Efficiency of flying, definitely international wins.
Right. And so, and you get more. Bottom line with that is, if you want to get, let's say, 80 hours a month or so, you can get your 80 hours a month in maybe 16 days, or you can get them in 20 days or so. And and with that Sydney flying, it's great because you're only really looking like you're away 60 hours from home. That's 2.5 days. So you can get your flying time only being gone from home at really like 7.5 days, and you have the rest of the month off.
Wow. So if that is the case, why don't all United pilots want to do international?
Flying international is hard on your body.
It is. So there's a lot of downsides to it.
Right.
What would be some downsides?
Well, just the jet lag. That's it. And some guys just don't want to deal with flying overseas, doing all the procedures that it takes to get over water and dealing with other countries. But I think most of them, it's just that they like having their body pretty much on the same body clock time. The worst you're going to have here is going to the East Coast, 3-hour time change.
3-hour difference.
Versus going like to New Delhi, India, and you're off by 11.5 or 12.5 hours, something like that.
Wow.
And it's hard, with dealing with the jet lag, and a lot depends on how long you are at the layover place, and a lot, sometimes you just can't sleep when you need to sleep.
That's so interesting. Yeah. So on these long flights, I know there's like, what is it? What do you guys call it? Bunk beds?
There's a bunk, yeah.
Like a bunk?
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work? Let's talk about San Francisco, Tel Aviv, because I've done that a few years ago, so I could imagine being on the plane. So we take off. How many pilots show up to the flight?
To be 4 pilots.
Four pilots.
1 captain, 3 first officers.
Wow. So, and the captain obviously is the captain of the flight. He sits there for takeoff and landing.
Okay.
And then how do the 3 first officers work? Like, is there a primary first officer and 2 not?
Well, like everything with the airline, it's seniority based. And so when the trip is built for the 3 first officers, they'll have 1 position built as a flying first officer. And then the other 2 first officers, we call them International Relief Officers, IROs, or bunkies for short, the slang bunkies. And so you'd have the captain and the flying FO would be up in the front, and they'll do all the ground stuff, getting ready for departure, and they'll do the takeoff and the climb out. And then you have the 2 guys sitting behind them, the bunkies.
In the flight deck. They sit there for takeoff and landing.
Right.
Got it.
All 4 of us are in the cockpit for takeoff and landing. Basically, you want to have all 4 guys in the cockpit, the first 30 minutes of flight and the last 45 minutes, hour of flight. All 4 guys are in the cockpit.
Got it.
And the way we do these flights is that we'll normally take the cruise time, so once we're up at altitude, but maybe a little bit before, and divide it in half. And typically the guys that are bunkies, as shortly after takeoff, maybe 20 minutes after takeoff, they will go to the bunk and they'll try and sleep. And now that's kind of tough if it's in the middle of the day that you're taking off and you had a good night's sleep before, and now you've got a 6-hour break, which is kind of a long break. There might be a little bit less than that, but some breaks are good. And when we do the New Delhi flight, they're about 7-hour breaks, which is a long time.
Well, and is it always the bunkies who go first?
Most cases.
Got it.
Doesn't always happen that way, but so typically the bunkies go first, and they'll get their 6-7 hour break trying to sleep in the bunk. And there's a room in the 787. It's up above the first row of first class. That's where the bunk room is. And when I was flying the 777, it was right behind the cockpit on the side. There's the newer 777 also has it up above the cabin. And anyway, so then about halfway through, we swap positions. And the bunkies come out. They come into the cockpit. The 2 guys that had done the takeoff, had been flying for the first half of the flight now, they go back to the bunk room, and they try and sleep. And they'll try and sleep in typically an hour to an hour and 20 minutes or so before landing, we'll wake them up, and then they'll come up, maybe have breakfast, have a meal, whatever, get the sleep out of their eyes if they were able to sleep, and then they'll do the approach and landing.
Wow.
And the idea being that now they are refreshed after having 6-7 hours of time off where they can close their eyes, lay down, and hopefully sleep.
That's so much. Now, all 4 pilots get paid the same?
No, captain gets paid more.
I mean, yeah, not other than first. I mean, the same in terms of relieving or bunkie or flying.
Yeah. So with the first officers, we all get paid the same. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So is it senior to pick up relief pilot position?
It depends on the individual's choice.
It sounds like it would be a tad less responsibility, less work.
It is. It's less work. Most guys want to be the flyer. It's because we like to fly, and we don't want to sit back there and watch somebody else do it. You like to do the takeoff, like to do the landing, and then we need to maintain our landing currency. If you don't have 3 landings within 90 days, you have to go back to the training center in Denver and do a simulator, update your landing currency, and then you're good for another 90 days.
Is that pretty typical where people who don't work much lose their currency?
Yes.
From the airlines?
What's typical is if you're a junior guy, because all the senior ones want to fly, you can't hold the position, the flying position.
You can't hold a landing.
Right. And so you never get that position. And so you end up going back to Denver every 3 months for a landings class.
That kind of sucks.
And I have been in that position where about every 3 months I was going back to Denver for a landings class. And the thing is, you might get 1 landing or 2 landings in that 3-month period, or 1 or 2 landings, but you need 3.
I see how that could happen, because if you're doing these long hauls, there's just 1 landing every 2 days.
Right.
And if you're not the one flying on the trip, you don't have any on that trip.
Yeah.
And if you do 4 of those trips, and it's just easy, I guess, to fall behind on the landings.
Yeah. Even if you are doing the flying position all the time, if you get vacation, then you're going to lose out there. Or sometimes the captains need to, when they're new on the airplane, they need to get their landings up to speed right away, and so they're doing all the landings for the first few hours that they're flying on the airplane. And I've had that happen where I was going to lose my landing currency. The captain says, "Well, no, I got to take the landing from you.
Oh my gosh.
I need to do that, because of where I am in my checkout program." Go, great. That means I'm going to Denver for a landings class.
Whoa. So you were saying that these days there's FOs being hired into the airline and going straight to wide bodies.
Right, which is just amazing from when I was hired.
How does that happen? Are there not current United pilots who want to be FOs on the wide body?
Exactly. Yeah.
There's none.
Well, yeah. There are people that are happy doing the narrow body, either narrow body captain or narrow body FO, and they don't want to upgrade yet for some reason. Yeah.
And they hire them direct into the wide body.
Yeah.
Do you think that's good, bad, or does it make a difference to start a pilot out on a big plane like that?
Well, United training is really good. I will say that. The training is excellent at United. I have nothing bad I can say about it. There have been a few bad instructors I've had over the years, but overall it's just been phenomenal. So they put out a really good product. It does help to have the experience in the smaller airplane because the thing is, you're taking somebody, it's a new hire, and you put them into the wide body as an FO. They're going to be doing these international flights. They're going to be a bunkie because that's all they're going to hold.
And they won't fly.
They will not get the experience of doing all the flows before takeoff, getting the airplane ready to fly, doing the takeoff, the climb out, then more importantly, the getting ready for the landing, the arrival, the approach, and everything to finish up the flight at the end. They're not getting that experience. And when they're early on, they need to get that experience.
That's so interesting. So it's basically they get hired and they go to the wide body and they just sit there and watch.
Right. And you can learn a lot by watching, but it's not like doing it yourself.
It's not like doing it yourself.
Right.
That's so interesting. What planes did you fly at United? You said 735?
Well, I've flown all Boeing. I did the 737, 47, 57, 67, 777, 87.
You did them all.
Did them all. Type ratings in all of them.
10 Airbus?
No, never did the Airbus.
Do you care about Airbus? Does it appeal to you?
Oh, I would have loved to have flown the Airbus. With my F-16 background, I like the side stick.
The side stick.
I like that a lot, yeah.
Wow. Which plane was your favorite at United?
Oh,
if you had to pick one.
Well, it just depends what for. The last one I was on, the 87, I like that a lot.
That's a cool plane.
Yeah, cool. It's being the newest, it has all the latest and greatest features. And as far as flying international, there's phenomenal things, the automation that we have, and then the information available, communicating with ATC. When I first started flying the international a long time ago, I was on first the 777, then went to 747, and trying to make the position reports with an HF radio before the data link was horrendous. We still have to do it occasionally when the data link system goes down, but it's very rare. And just things are so much better now with
over water operations and things like that.
With the international operation and the communication with the controlling agencies.
I was talking yesterday with a pilot who flies the 747, and no kidding, he was saying his favorite part of the 747 is taxiing around airports. Did you experience? He said you sit so high up.
Yeah.
Did you find taxiing the 747 to be kind of?
Well, as an FO, I didn't taxi the airplane.
Oh, you don't taxi?
No.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, and so I'm up there, and you're high, you can see really well, but boy, you've got this massive airplane behind you.
That's what you're saying. It's like driving a big building.
And you've got to know where those wingtips are so you don't hit something, which is has happened occasionally, right? And so you got to be very careful. Got to follow the taxi lines, and of course sometimes you're because of the length of the airplane and where the nose gear is compared to the cockpit, you got to go beyond your turn point.
It's like a semi-truck.
Yeah, and make the turn.
That's crazy. So in the name of starting to wrap things up, I could talk with you for days. This is really interesting. But because, like we were saying, we're in a day and age where airlines are just hungry for pilots, I want to pick your brain on, just from your perspective, let's say there's someone watching this. So like you said before, you said throw your application out to all airlines and see who reaches out.
Right.
So looking back in your entire career, what would you tell the person out there who was like yourself, who wants to kind of be a pilot, but doesn't dare to even think in that direction because they don't think it's possible. They don't know anything about it. So like with all your experience, what would you tell someone now looking back?
Hey, if I can do it, you can do it.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So looking back, you're saying was it easier than you thought, or was it just possible when you didn't even know it was?
It was possible. It wasn't easy. It was hard work.
It is.
But the thing is setting a goal. That you get a goal, what you want to do, and then you just do what it takes to make it happen.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. Going through college and everything. Just do whatever it took to make it happen. What the goal was.
Yeah. What do you miss most about the airlines?
Well, the last few years was flying with my wife. She's also on the airplane FO, and so I mentioned she's just upgrading to captain now.
Congratulations.
So we stayed senior FOs, so we could fly a lot of trips together. We wouldn't fly every trip together, but we tried to fly a lot of trips together, and it was enjoyable. We would go around the world like little mini vacations, and I mentioned going to Jerusalem. I did a Tel Aviv flight, and we had 4-day layover there. So rented a car.
Oh, that's nice.
And just drove we drove all over Israel. We had trips to Guam where we'd have 3 days in Guam, staying at a really nice hotel, kind of like a resort, and then do a Singapore turn, then back to Guam for another 4 days, and stay in a resort there. Beautiful pool area, beach, and stuff like that. But scuba diving and so it was fun doing these things with her. Nice. And so I'll definitely gonna miss that. Just flying around and having fun. And I enjoyed flying. I did encounter some pilots that they would just complain. They don't want to be here. They want the flight to cancel. They want to go home. And I enjoyed it. You
enjoyed it all, the process.
Oh, yeah, I enjoy flying. I enjoy getting the air under my butt and flying and looking around at things. I enjoy the challenge of trying to make my best landing ever every time. Every time I try and do my best landing ever, that'll challenge, and
Wow.
trying to always do the flight without making any mistakes. You're going to make a mistake at some point in time, but always just that's a challenge. Always try and do your best flight ever. No
That's
mistakes.
So much, it's really incredible how, specifically with flying airplanes, you could always get better. You never reach a point. And I think that's what's really so cool about it.
Yeah.
You could always really better. Where was your last flight to?
My last flight was my retirement flight, and that was I was a flying FO, and my wife was the bunkie, and we went to Tahiti.
Tahiti?
Yes.
Now, did you pick that, or did that
I picked that, and that was not easy to get.
You orchestrated it.
Yeah, even though I was relatively senior, I think I was about number 20 in the base at the time, there were still a lot. It's a very popular trip. And so I had to communicate with the 19 people ahead of me and let them know I really wanted this flight for my retirement flight. And only one person gave me a little bit of issue, but then they backed off.
I don't care that you're retiring. Right. I want my Tahiti.
Yeah. So anyway, that took a lot of planning ahead of time. I probably worked on that 3 months out. Started working on exactly which flight it was going to be, because there were other things to do with the amount of time the flight was worth and the day of the month I was retiring and things like that. It's a little too elaborate to get into, but
wow,
that was my last flight, and it was a great flight. The captain, I requested him to bid the trip.
So this was the person you specifically wanted to...
Right. My wife and I had flown with him to Sydney a lot and on other trips, and just a really super captain. I like him a lot, Sean Buckley. And so he was on the flight, and he let me fly both legs, and so I enjoyed that.
That's good. Now, was your retirement? I'm assuming your retirement flight was Tahiti to L.A.
Well, the whole trip was, but yeah, my last flight.
Your last.
Yeah, I flew the leg to Tahiti, then we had a great time there. Got a nice overwater bungalow, and then had my two daughters were there with me, and my son-in-law, and then I did the leg back too, and landing in San Fran. That was my last time. Yeah.
How emotional was your last landing? Is it? Could you prepare for it, or when you touch down, you go, man, this 30-year career, was it emotional?
Oh, I knew it was coming. I've known it's been coming since I got hired. That they changed the age 60 to 65 retirement age a number of years ago. Was that 2012 or something like that?
Probably around there.
Yeah, about that time. And anyway, so I've known since then that I'd be retiring, and I accept it. It's going to happen. And so on the pressure was, I've got my wife flying with me, and my friends, my family. Don't screw up the landing. That's the pressure. Don't screw up the landing.
I love
it. So I tried to do the best landing I could, as usual.
That's awesome. Here's like I said, I could talk with you for days. Last question, which I think you're a fitting person to ask this question to as a senior FO who's flown with hundreds of captains. According to you, in your personal book, Paul, what makes a good captain?
Oh, wow. Yeah, what makes a good captain is listening to the other crew members, knowing your stuff, I don't know, being considerate and a good captain. And yeah, I think those, listening to the other people, the crew member, but knowing your stuff, knowing what the right decisions to make.
So actually, being a captain makes a good captain.
Yeah.
It's like be it.
Yeah.
Be a captain.
Yeah. When you're the captain, be the captain.
Be the captain. Yeah. I love it.
And but a big part is taking in all the information from everybody
and considering it,
and then making the decision. Yeah.
I love it, Paul. I love talking with you.
Yeah, enjoyed it too.
Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. Incredible.